Highly intelligent, autonomous individuals frequently find themselves paralyzed in abusive dynamics they cannot logic their way out of. Relationships with sadistic or psychopathic cluster B individuals operate as highly calculated, closed-loop behavioral control systems. This laboratory setup shows scientist B.F. Skinner observing a rat inside an operant conditioning chamber. In this environment, the subject is trained to perform behaviors through a specific schedule of rewards and punishments. The psychological dynamic of narcissistic abuse mirrors this mechanical trap. The abuser executes a premeditated protocol to condition the victim, stripping away personal autonomy and agency through systematic reinforcement. Survival requires treating psychological abuse as a scientifically engineered system of cognitive entrainment that must be systematically deactivated. The architect behind this system is an individual with a cluster B personality disorder who presents a carefully constructed fabrication to the world. This schematic, the anatomy of the false self, shows the abuser's psyche. The outer shell, the grandiose mask, projects sexual confidence, aggressive charm, and superiority. This engineered mask protects the unhealed void at the core, a fractured center of deep-seated shame and complete emotional emptiness. Lacking internal emotional regulation, the abuser relies on narcissistic supply, extracting validation and stability from a targeted victim to sustain their false self. This blueprint illustrates the full architecture of the trap, showing the mechanical loops used to capture, isolate, and continuously condition the target. The narcissist constructs a human appliance, specifically to manage their internal void and absorb their recurring dysregulation. The timeline of the trap begins with Phase 1, love bombing, a period of rapid emotional and romantic escalation. This phase is a calculated campaign of capture, deploying intense flattery to bypass the victim's natural defenses and create immediate enmeshment. Clinically, love bombing charts an intense, all-pervasive attachment, while signaling the abuser's supposed purity and good intentions. This process gaslights the target into an immersive virtual reality bubble, creating a hall of mirrors where the victim becomes addicted to an idealized version of themselves. Simultaneously, the abuser engages in sexual and psychological grooming, establishing a power hierarchy and methodically isolating the victim from their social networks. The final goal of this phase is total enmeshment, where the target willingly dismantles their own boundaries before the conditioning begins. When the grandiose mask becomes too exhausting to maintain, the system hits the pivot point and shifts into Phase 2, devaluation. In this stage, the relationship transforms into a toxic reinforcement dispenser, shifting from predictability to the variable reward schedule. Intermittent reinforcement involves unpredictable payouts, alternating between affection and cruelty, which creates a frantic, self-destructive attachment. This circular machinery maps the trauma bond. Tension and cruelty trigger cortisol spikes, followed by dopamine spikes when relief is granted, locking the victim into a biochemical cycle of obsession. The most insidious reinforcement mechanism is the cessation of punishment. The reward is simply the absence of pain. When abuse stops, the sudden neurological relief trains the victim to endure horrific treatment just to achieve a baseline reset. This neurological survival addiction, driven by one of science's most powerful behavioral schedules, overrides the victim's capacity for logical choice. The abuser imposes a shared psychotic space, a cult-like environment where reality is denied and external connections are severed. The abuser installs psychological introjects, mental backdoors, forcing the victim into a submissive or maternal role to artificially regulate the abuser's unresolved childhood trauma. Within this space, the abuser weaponizes basic human intimacy as a control protocol to maintain absolute power. Tactics include sudden shutdowns where affection vanishes, transactional rewards for compliance, and triangulation, hinting at other partners to manufacture jealousy. Any attempt by the victim to exit this space triggers narcissistic mortification, causing the abuser to react with extreme, punitive sadism. Victim infidelity or escape attempts function as a desperate psychological bid to create an alternative sanctuary and shatter the shared delusion. Recovery requires more than just understanding the machine. The gears must be physically obstructed to stop the cycle. Because the trauma bond is wired into the nervous system as a survival addiction, logic and empathy will fail to break the conditioning. Disabling the reinforcement lever requires installing a rigid, non-negotiable boundary architecture to shield the target from the abuser's tactics. The outer layer of this defense focuses on communication, an absolute refusal to engage with triangulation, gaslighting, or disrespect. The No Jade protocol instructs victims to never justify, argue, defend, or explain their limits. These boundaries exist independently of the abuser's agreement. Since these boundaries will trigger pushback and rage, they must be paired with pre-decided consequences to be effective. Recovery involves a shift from emotional vulnerability to the strict, mechanical enforcement of rules. True human connection requires emotional presence, open communication, and inherent safety, the direct opposites of the narcissistic machine's mechanics. The abuser targeted specific traits, the capacity for love, adaptation, and resource production, precisely because they lack these qualities. Reclaiming physical autonomy and treating the body as a temple away from the abuser initiates the necessary neurological reset. The gray rock method of emotional detachment provides a path to recognizing that the abuser's cruelty stems from their own internal dysfunction. Survival requires recognizing the trap, engaging specialized therapy for complex trauma, and stepping permanently out of the box.